The diner's neon sign flickered in the cold night, casting a dull glow over the empty street. Inside, Sarah Parker wiped down the last table, her arms aching from the 16-hour shift. Her apron smelled of coffee and fried food. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers, but she pushed through because she had to. For Emma, Sarah glanced at her phone. 2:17 a.m. Another late night. Another missed bedtime story. Her heart twisted with guilt. She had promised Emma she'd be home early, but a double shift meant another $60 in tips, enough to buy groceries for the week. Pulling off her apron, she grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The New York winter bit through her sweater, but she barely noticed. She was used to it, the cold, the exhaustion, the constant weight of survival pressing on her chest. She walked the 4 blocks to her second job at a 24-hour convenience store, where she'd work until dawn before heading to her third job at a cleaning service. This was her life, a relentless cycle of work, exhaustion, and sacrifice. The call that changed everything. At 7:45 a.m., Sarah unlocked her tiny apartment, her hands trembling with fatigue. Inside, Emma lay curled up on the couch, still in her pajamas. Her babysitter, Mrs. Holloway, had fallen asleep in the chair. "Mommy." Emma's sleepy voice was soft, but it pierced Sarah's heart like a knife. "I'm here, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. She wanted nothing more than to curl up beside Emma and sleep for days. But reality wouldn't let her. She had to make breakfast, pay the overdue electricity bill, and figure out how to stretch $84 to last the next 2 weeks. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably another bill collector. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. "Hello? Ms. Parker, this is Alexander Bennett's office. Mr. Bennett would like to meet with you." Sarah froze. Alexander Bennett, the billionaire CEO of Bennett Industries, one of the most powerful men in the country. "This must be a mistake," she said, gripping the phone tighter. "Why would Mr. Bennett want to meet me?" The woman on the other end didn't hesitate. "He has a job opportunity for you. A high-paying one." Sarah's breath caught. A real job? A way out of this nightmare? "When?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Today, 11 a.m. Bennett Tower. Don't be late." A billionaire's offer. At exactly 11 a.m., Sarah stepped into Bennett Tower, feeling completely out of place. The marble floors, the glass walls, the crisp scent of wealth and power. It was a different world. She clutched her thrift store purse, trying not to notice the way the receptionist eyed her faded coat. "Ms. Parker?" A deep voice called. She turned, and her breath hitched. Alexander Bennett stood before her, tall, composed, radiating an intimidating authority. His piercing gray eyes scanned her, analyzing, calculating. "Thank you for coming," he said smoothly, gesturing for her to follow him into his office. Sarah sat stiffly as Bennett leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "I know about your situation," he began. "You're struggling to make ends meet. You're working 3 jobs, and you have a 6-year-old daughter." Sarah's pulse quickened. How did he know all of this? "I want to offer you a position," he continued. "An executive assistant role. Full benefits, a 6-figure salary." Sarah's mind reeled. 6 figures? It sounded like a dream. But dreams didn't come without a price. "What's the catch?" she asked. Bennett's gaze sharpened. "The job requires full commitment. You'll need to travel, work overtime, be available at all hours." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Emma, you'd have to send your daughter to live with relatives," Bennett added, watching her reaction closely. "A small sacrifice for a life-changing opportunity. A life-changing opportunity. Or a life-changing mistake." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. For the first time in years, she was being offered an escape from poverty. A future for Emma that wasn't built on suffering. But was she willing to pay the price? Sarah stared at the sleek contract in front of her. The Bennett Industries logo gleamed at the top, an emblem of power and prestige. The salary was more than she had ever dared to dream of. $250,000 a year. Health benefits. A retirement plan. Financial security for Emma. But beneath the bold letters and polished promises, the words felt like chains. Full commitment. Availability 24/7. Extended travel requirements. Sarah's heart pounded. Was she really considering this? Across the massive oak desk, Alexander Bennett watched her carefully, his piercing gray eyes unreadable. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "I understand this is a difficult decision, Miss Parker," he said. "But opportunities like this don't come twice." His voice was calm, confident. He knew she was desperate, and he knew she had no better option. Sarah swallowed hard. "If I take this job, what happens to my daughter?" Bennett didn't blink. "She will be taken care of. I assume she has family?" "My sister, but she has 3 kids of her own." "Then I'll arrange financial support. Emma will want for nothing. She'll have a better life." A better life. The words echoed in Sarah's mind. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. She thought of Emma's laughter, her tiny arms wrapping around her neck, her sleepy voice whispering, "I love you, Mommy," before bed. Could she really give that up? Could she live without hearing her daughter's voice every night? But could she live with Emma growing up in poverty? Her fingers tightened around the pen. Slowly, she signed her name. The deal was done. A new world. The next morning, Sarah woke up in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The plush bed beneath her felt like a cloud, the sheets softer than anything she had ever owned. Her old life, the tiny apartment, the unpaid bills, the sleepless nights, felt like a distant memory. But when she turned to the nightstand, her heart clenched. Emma's stuffed bunny sat there, staring back at her. She had left her daughter behind. Sarah shook off the guilt and dressed in the designer clothes left for her in the massive walk-in closet. She looked like a different person, strong, polished, wealthy, but inside, she still felt like the exhausted single mother scraping by on tips. As she walked into Bennett's private office, everything about her new world screamed power and luxury. The walls were lined with glass, displaying the skyline like a trophy. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, though the room was already warm. Bennett stood at the window, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn as she entered. "You made the right choice," he said. Sarah forced a smile. "I hope so. You will." He finally turned, his expression unreadable. "I need someone I can trust. This job isn't just answering calls and scheduling meetings. You'll be handling sensitive company affairs." Sarah's stomach tightened. What kind of affairs? Before she could ask, the door opened, and a tall, elegant woman walked in. Rebecca, Bennett's former assistant. Her eyes locked onto Sarah with something between pity and warning. "I hope you're ready for this," Rebecca said softly. "Because once you're in, there's no turning back." Cracks in the perfect facade. Sarah's first week was a whirlwind of luxury and exhaustion. Private jets, high-profile meetings, exclusive dinners. She was surrounded by billionaires, politicians, and power brokers. And Bennett, he was always watching her. He never crossed any lines, but there was something unsettling about the way he spoke to her, the way his presence loomed over every aspect of her life. Then, on Friday night, something happened that shattered the illusion. Sarah was working late, organizing files in Bennett's office. She accidentally knocked over a folder, spilling its contents onto the floor. As she gathered the papers, one file caught her eye. A name she recognized. Jonathan Caldwell. Her breath hitched. Caldwell was a journalist, one who had mysteriously disappeared last year while investigating Bennett Industries. Her hands shook as she skimmed the file. Bank records, surveillance photos, a termination report. Sarah's stomach twisted. Had Bennett been involved in his disappearance? She stuffed the papers back into the folder, her pulse racing. For the first time since she signed the contract, she realized the truth. She hadn't taken a job. She had walked into a trap. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the folder against her chest. Jonathan Caldwell. The name alone sent a chill down her spine. She had read about his disappearance last year. One moment, he was publishing scathing articles about Bennett Industries, and the next, he was gone. No explanations. No trace. And now, his name was here, in Bennett's private files. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Was she working for a criminal? Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sarah panicked, shoving the folder back into the cabinet and forcing herself to breathe. Just as she composed herself, the door opened. Bennett. His sharp gray eyes scanned the room before settling on her. "You're working late," he said, his voice smooth but observant. Sarah forced a tight smile. "Just organizing documents. I wanted to get ahead." Bennett nodded, stepping inside. "I admire dedication. That's why I chose you, Sarah. You're not just another employee. You have potential." Her stomach churned. "Potential for what?" "Thank you," she murmured, gripping the desk to keep her hands from shaking. Bennett walked past her, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "Loyalty is important in my business. I need people who understand that discretion is everything." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You understand that, don't you?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Of course." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Good. Because in this world, knowing too much can be dangerous." Her heart nearly stopped. Did he suspect her? Was this a warning? Bennett sipped his drink, watching her reaction. "Go home, Sarah. You've earned some rest." She swallowed hard and nodded, then quickly left the office, barely holding it together. The moment she stepped into the elevator, she pulled out her phone. She needed to talk to Rebecca. Rebecca agreed to meet her in a small, dimly lit diner away from the corporate district. As soon as Sarah slid into the booth, Rebecca's eyes locked onto hers. "You found something, didn't you?" Sarah nodded. "Jonathan Caldwell." Rebecca exhaled sharply. "I was afraid of that." Sarah leaned in. "What happened to him?" Rebecca hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "He was getting too close. Bennett doesn't just run a business. He controls people, information, entire industries. Caldwell was about to expose him, and then..." She swallowed. "He disappeared. Just like the others." Sarah's skin went cold. "Others?" Rebecca's expression hardened. "You have no idea who you're working for. Bennett doesn't just fire people. He erases them." Sarah's breath hitched. What had she gotten herself into? "Listen to me," Rebecca whispered urgently. "You need to leave. Tonight. The longer you stay, the harder it will be." Sarah's mind spun. If she left, she'd lose everything. The money, the security, the chance to provide for Emma. But if she stayed, she might not make it out at all. A lump formed in her throat. "I signed a contract." Rebecca's expression darkened. "Contracts don't mean anything to men like Bennett. You think you're an employee? You're a possession." Sarah's stomach twisted. She had sold herself to a monster. Escape plan. She barely slept that night. Her mind raced with a single question. How do I get out? By morning, she had a plan. 1. Retrieve the Caldwell file. If she had proof, she had leverage. 2. Go to the authorities. Someone had to be willing to take Bennett down. 3. Get Emma back. No matter what, she wouldn't leave her daughter behind. She packed a small bag and took one last look at the lavish penthouse she had been living in. It had never been hers. It was a gilded cage. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out, determined. She was going to expose Bennett. But as she walked down the street, a sleek black car slowly pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. Bennett's cold eyes met hers. "You're making a mistake, Sarah." Her blood turned to ice. He knew. And now, there was no turning back. Sarah's breath hitched as she spotted the sleek black car parked across the street. They were watching her. She gripped her phone tightly, her fingers trembling. She had been careful, so careful. But somehow, Bennett had found out. A vibration against her palm made her jump. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Sarah." Bennett's voice was smooth, almost amused. "You've been very busy." Her stomach twisted. "You think you can expose me?" he continued. "That's disappointing." Sarah swallowed hard. "You can't silence the truth." A low chuckle. "Oh, Sarah. The truth is whatever I decide it to be." A click. The call ended. A sharp wave of fear surged through her. She had to move now. She turned sharply, slipping into the nearest alley, heart hammering against her ribs. Then, a hand clamped around her arm. She gasped, twisting, ready to fight. But it was Rebecca. "We need to go. Now." Rebecca's eyes were wide with urgency. Sarah nodded. They ran. No safe haven. They reached Rebecca's apartment in record time. Sarah locked the door behind them, her chest heaving. Rebecca rushed to her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. I got into Bennett's system. The file. It's worse than we thought. Sarah leaned over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the screen. Jonathan Caldwell, Rachel Mendez, Ian Porter. Then, her breath caught. Her own name was there. Sarah Weston, status, pending. Her vision blurred. What does that mean? Rebecca's voice was grim. It means you're next. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Then, a loud bang at the door. They froze. Another bang, harder this time. Rebecca's eyes widened. We have to. The door burst open. Men in black suits stormed in. Sarah screamed as strong hands grabbed her, yanking her back. Rebecca struggled, kicking and thrashing. But one of the men shoved her against the wall, pinning her. Then, Bennett walked in, calm, smirking, like he had already won. Sarah glared at him, chest heaving. You can't do this. Bennett sighed. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. He shook his head, almost pitying. You never understood the game, did you? Rebecca spat at him. You're finished. We have your files. Bennett smirked. Oh, you mean this? He held up a flash drive. Sarah's stomach dropped. He had known all along. That's the problem with idealists, he mused. You think the truth will save you. But in my world, the truth is whatever I say it is. Sarah clenched her jaw, her fury bubbling over. Then why haven't you killed me yet? Bennett leaned in, his voice a whisper. Because I have a better idea. He snapped his fingers. The men pulled black hoods over Sarah and Rebecca's heads. Darkness swallowed them. The scent of damp concrete filled Sarah's lungs as the hood was yanked off her head. Blinding light. A warehouse, cold, empty, vast. Her heart pounded as her eyes adjusted. Rebecca was beside her, wrists tied, eyes darting frantically, and in front of them stood Alexander Bennett. Dressed in his signature tailored suit, he looked untouchable, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Sarah, he drawled, adjusting his cufflinks. I knew you were smart, but I didn't expect you to be a traitor. Sarah's throat was dry, but she forced herself to stand tall. Exposing the truth isn't betrayal. Bennett chuckled. Oh, but it is, to the wrong people. He gestured, and a guard shoved Rebecca to her knees. You had a chance to walk away, Bennett continued, circling them like a predator. But now, you get a different choice. He snapped his fingers, and a second guard stepped forward, holding a gun. Take the money. Disappear. Forget everything. And your friend lives. His smile darkened. Or, she dies. The guard cocked the gun. Rebecca's breath hitched. Sarah, don't do this. I'd rather. Shut up, the guard hissed. Sarah's hands trembled. Her mind raced. Taking the deal meant Bennett would win. Refusing meant Rebecca would die. Her gaze flickered to the guard's belt. A knife. Bennett sighed. I'll count to 5. This was it. Sarah met Rebecca's eyes. Then, she moved. The strike. In a single motion, Sarah lunged forward, yanking the knife from the guard's belt. Before he could react, she drove it into his thigh. The guard screamed, stumbling back. Rebecca kicked upwards, knocking the gun loose. It skidded across the floor. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the gun. Bennett's smirk vanished. He raised his hands slightly, stepping back. You don't want to do this, he said smoothly. Sarah cocked the gun. Try me. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Bennett's eyes widened. Rebecca grinned, panting. You're not the only one with connections, Bennett. The warehouse doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed inside. Bennett turned to run, but Sarah fired. A single shot. It hit his shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor. Justice had arrived. Freedom. Days later, Sarah sat by a cafe window, the morning sun warming her skin. Emma giggled beside her, happily munching on a muffin. Across from her, Rebecca stirred her coffee, smirking. So, how does it feel to take down a billionaire? Sarah exhaled. Like I can finally breathe. She glanced at the keys in her hand. The sign outside read, Emma's Diner, fresh starts served daily. Her own business, her new beginning. For the first time in years, she was free. As the days turned into weeks, the man found himself more and more entrenched in Susan's world. The once unfamiliar routines of family life, school runs, dinners with the girls, gym sessions, had seamlessly become his own. The bond he had developed with Susan and the relationship with her daughters had transformed into something so powerful and real, he couldn't imagine life without it. He was no longer just someone visiting. He was becoming part of their foundation, someone who contributed, supported, and loved. But in the quiet moments, when the world slowed down and it was just him and Susan, he knew he needed to take the next step. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon when the realization hit him. He wanted forever. He had already built something precious with Susan and her daughters, but now he knew that he wanted to make it official. He didn't just want to be a guest in their world. He wanted to be the one who helped build it, who stayed through the tough times and celebrated the good ones. The man was ready to marry Susan, to stand by her side, to become a permanent part of their family. He decided he would propose, but not with grand gestures or sweeping drama. No, this was a proposal born from the quiet understanding of what they had built, from the simple moments of shared smiles, trust, and laughter. He didn't need a big stage. He just needed the right moment. That moment came during one of their routine gym sessions. As Susan finished her last set of squats, he noticed the familiar determination in her eyes. There was always something grounding about the way she moved, her fierce independence and strength radiating in everything she did. But today, as they caught each other's gaze, he saw more. He saw someone who had let him in, someone who had trusted him with the most precious parts of her life, her heart and her daughters. He had no doubt. This was where he was meant to be. "Susan," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. She looked up, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about this, about what we've built together. And I don't want it to be temporary. I don't want it to just be a chapter. I want this to be my forever." Susan's heart skipped a beat. She had known that their bond had deepened over time, but to hear him speak of forever was something she hadn't allowed herself to imagine until now. The man stepped closer, his hand reaching into his gym bag and pulling out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a ring. It wasn't extravagant, but it held meaning, a symbol of their love and commitment. His voice was gentle but resolute as he spoke. "I want to marry you, Susan. I want to be with you. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but for every day after that. I want to help raise your girls, be the man you need, and the father they deserve. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Susan's eyes, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had never imagined that someone could love her so completely, that someone could want to be with her and her children, accepting everything that came with it. Her mind swirled with emotions, joy, fear, hope, and love, and before she could hold them back, the words escaped her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will marry you." The man smiled, his heart swelling with relief and happiness. They stood there, amidst the clang of weights and the hum of gym machines, but none of that mattered. The world outside felt distant. In this moment, it was just the two of them, two people who had found each other in the midst of their complicated lives. Later that evening, they shared the news with the girls, who were beyond thrilled. Zoe and Maya cheered, running to hug the man and Susan, thrilled at the idea of a permanent family. It was a moment that sealed their bond even further. It wasn't just a marriage between two adults. It was the joining of hearts, the blending of lives, and the creation of a new family that would thrive on love, trust, and shared memories. The following months were filled with the excitement of wedding plans and blending their families together. There were challenges, of course, adjustments to be made, old wounds to heal, but together, they faced it all. The man continued to grow closer to Susan's daughters, helping with homework, attending parent-teacher meetings, and becoming a steady presence in their lives. On their wedding day, as they stood at the altar, surrounded by friends and family, Susan couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She had once been a woman who thought love was a fleeting thing, something too risky to trust, but now, standing beside the man who had proven his love every single day, she realized that love was worth it. It had brought her to this moment, a moment where she could finally say, "I have everything I've ever wanted." The man, too, knew he had found his home. He had once walked through life aimlessly, unsure of where he belonged. But now, he had found purpose, a family, and love, something he would never take for granted. The ceremony was beautiful, simple but filled with meaning. As they exchanged vows, they promised to love each other through every high and low, to cherish the family they had created, and to always support each other. The man slipped the ring onto Susan's finger, and she did the same. As they kissed, sealing their vows, the crowd erupted in applause. But for Susan and the man, it was the beginning of a lifelong journey, one they would face together. Years later, as they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their girls grow into strong, independent young women, Susan leaned her head on the man's shoulder. She smiled, content and at peace, knowing that this family, this love, was exactly what she had always dreamed of, even when she didn't believe it was possible. And as the man looked at her, he knew that the struggles they had both faced were nothing compared to the joy they would continue to build. Together, they had found something priceless, something lasting, and that was all that mattered.